Hi, I'm Sarah Courbis. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but I really appreciate the opportunity I'm being given to share with you some information about communicating environmental benefits of marine renewables. I think communication is a really important part of what we do in the marine renewables space, and there's certainly been plenty of mis and disinformation out there in the public that encourages us to get out there and start talking more about the benefits of marine renewables. And so I really appreciate having the opportunity to do that today. I work for EPI Group. I'm a principal scientist there, and I work in protected species and regulatory aspects of marine renewables. And if you would like to get in touch with me, again, I'm very sorry I couldn't be there today, but I really enjoy having this conversation and getting further into the weeds. So please feel free to reach out to me. My email is there on the screen, and I'd love to follow up with folks. So I think we've all seen some of these types of headlines. There's been a lot of mis and disinformation and negative publicity for marine renewables. Some of these aren't even new. The Ocean Energy Project Bad for Whales is a very old headline related to marine hydrokinetic projects. Actually, in that one, as a good example here, I went and looked up the researcher that they were citing in this article and found that this person has no published articles at all on killer whales. And so there's this issue with the press and the public understanding the difference between organizations with agendas who are making statements in the news versus people who are genuine experts. So it's really important for those of us with expertise to actually get out there and be talking to people and telling them accurate information about offshore renewables. So what are some of the kinds of information that we should be sharing? A good example is that offshore wind is actually helping whales. And this is a real thing. This isn't like a theoretical in the future, maybe when we're doing something. On the East Coast, as a really great example, since offshore wind has become more of interest and there have been power purchase agreements and people have been buying leases and moving forward with projects there, it's created an entire industry around collecting data and getting more information and sharing that information, particularly around North Atlantic right whales. So not only does offshore wind help to address issues that are affecting right whales like climate change, it's also creating a network of information. It's encouraged a large-scale passive acoustic monitoring deployment. There's lots of information being shared with the agencies so that they can do a better job of implementing dynamic management areas and understanding where animals are and when they're there, and looking at how offshore wind farms can be better platforms of opportunity in the long run to collect, share, and use data to help inform conservation and management of whales. It's very hard to get sufficient resources to get the data you need, particularly on species where there's not a lot of them, and then that makes it very difficult to study without having infusions of interest both from the public and the commercial sector. And so this has been, I think, a real boon for whales on the East Coast, and gives me hope that we may actually get enough information and support to do more to help protect the North Atlantic right whale. Another effect of offshore renewables is the potential to use platforms of opportunity to improve environmental conditions. A good example of this is the geophysical industry. You need to collect geophysical data no matter what kind of infrastructure you're putting out in the ocean, aquaculture, offshore wind farm, tidal energy, whatever you happen to be doing. You're going to need information about the bottom. So there will be vessels out there that are collecting that information. One of the programs that's been really successful in the geophysical industry is multiple programs to collect marine debris. And when we think about things like, say, offshore wind on the West Coast, and there could be, for floating wind, it could be a secondary entanglement risk with marine debris. One of the things you can do to really reduce that risk just for animals in general, let alone on the wind farm itself, is collect marine debris and properly dispose of it on land, which is already an infrastructure that's in place. As you can see here, an example of this is the Energeo Alliance, which has been doing a Sustainable Seas initiative for a number of years. And you can see here, they've collected over 2 million pounds of debris since 2016 and disposed of it in a way that it's no longer posing a threat to marine life. There's international programs that engage like this with marine debris. So this is already like an existing infrastructure. And then you can think about things maybe you want to put infrastructure in place to do other than this, or set up different infrastructure. But this is an opportunity where you're going to have people at sea doing work that can actually engage and be part of the solution for marine pollution. In addition, we're collecting a lot of data. So again, this isn't just theoretical, like maybe offshore renewables will collect some data that's useful. This is going on right now and will continue to expand as we look to develop more marine renewable resources. There are really important data that are being collected that can be used. And because there's commercial interest, it brings in a lot more funding and platforms of opportunity and support for being able to get out there and collect those data that can improve our ability to manage species. It can improve our ability for weather prediction, for predicting where fish may be, for fisheries, all kinds of things that we collect data in the ocean, of course, but when there's a commercial interest, it just brings a lot more to the table. For example, on the East Coast, there's been the development of a full-scale passive acoustic monitoring system along the entire coastal region with a database that's been specifically set up for the purpose of taking in those data and displaying them, as you can see here in the passive acoustic cetacean map. And MODIS is another good example of it. It's hard to understand what birds are doing over water. There's a lot more data we can collect and a lot more understanding we can have by collecting data with platforms that are actually on the water. Then, of course, as we're collecting more and new data and new types of data, we have the opportunity to create new data products, to put those products into spaces where they can be publicly available or available to agencies or decision makers, or if they're culturally sensitive or things like that. Tribes can manage data. There's a lot of information that we can put out there into the public space. And again, it's not just theoretical. On the West Coast, for example, here we have databasin.org and the West Coast Data Portal, both of which have really wonderful interfaces for using various types of data resources. There's more national systems of the CMAP, IUS, Marine Cadastre, etc., where these things can be put. There's regional systems on the East Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, etc. So there's a lot of opportunities here for us to get data products and information out, and we're already starting to do so. Furthermore, offshore renewables are an opportunity for us to actually enhance biodiversity and to improve systems where they're struggling or where there are negative impacts from pollution and other things like that. You can see here in this example, again, these aren't just theoretical things. There's actual products that have been engineered and are being used in infrastructure in the offshore area to improve biodiversity, to reduce the likelihood of invasive species, all these types of things. You can see some examples here. I thought this example in the map there is actually a distribution of, they're releasing oyster spat, and they're working to increase the oysters available in that region. It's actually in Europe, but they're using offshore wind in this case as a platform of opportunity for them to address issues with oysters in the region. So these are the opportunities that we have when we have this infrastructure in place. Another really important thing to share with people is the effect of improvements to technology. There's a huge investment that's been going into technology development to help with monitoring, collecting data, managing and maintaining offshore renewable infrastructure. This is allowing us to create technologies that are able to be in deeper waters, in more remote places. There's a commercial incentive for people to design things that they can't, you can't sell something if there's not a commercial use for it. In this case, or at least in most cases, that's challenging to do. So this is a great opportunity that, again, people are taking advantage of. We're seeing much better systems coming online for monitoring animals, marine mammals, passive acoustic monitoring, bird monitoring, underwater AUV equipment, things like that. There's been huge investments from the federal government, from state governments, and various academic institutions to do more to create that type of technology. So this will help us with collecting data for anything we want to collect data for. This technology now comes into existence and becomes commercially available. Then it can be used for all kinds of different things, not just renewable energy, to help us with conservation and management in marine environments. In addition, offshore renewables are resulting in a lot of really amazing partnerships. Academic institutions, government organizations, NGOs, developers of various kinds, and commercial interests, tribes, et cetera, are getting together and creating organizations together to be able to implement offshore energy in the renewable sector, but also, again, collecting all kinds of data together, thinking about how there can be community benefits. Organizations like the Regional Wildlife Science Collaborative and the Responsible Offshore Science Alliance are doing quite a bit of work. They're aggregating funds to create a lot of projects that can be larger scale and more regional, which is really important for ocean management. They're also creating a lot of data standards and helping to design databases and keeping track of research that's ongoing. And we're looking at different ways to develop similar types of organizations on the West Coast. And so there's a lot of opportunities here. And again, it's not just like theoretical. These are things that are happening now and have happened quite a bit in the offshore wind sector, since that has been expanding over the last 10 years. But there's a lot more opportunity ahead of us. So to summarize, in addition to the importance of talking about climate change, and most people, again, have kind of heard about the idea of reef effects, I think it's really important that we not just be reactive to negative press or spend all of our time talking about what some of the adverse impacts are and how we're mitigating those, although those are important to talk about. We really need to make sure that we have a narrative that we're sharing about all these benefits. The effects of offshore renewable energy are also positive, and there's a lot of positive things we're getting out of this. We're getting a lot more data, a lot better tech. We're able to monitor a lot more. We can make better decisions about management and conservation. We can think about how we're using these platforms of opportunity to address problems that aren't caused by offshore renewables, but like marine debris, but we have an opportunity to address. It's really important to see this investment going into research. It's hard to get dollars when there isn't a commercial reason. It's hard to make tech when there's not people to buy it. So this is a really important part of the sort of social and economic aspects of developing marine renewables as well. And then the nature-based design and the biodiversity, I mean, you could look at the idea of going into a system and thinking about how can I actually end up with a net positive here. There's, of course, always going to be some adverse impacts from developing any kind of project in the offshore space, but we can mitigate that to the extent that's reasonable, and then also look at how we can improve the situation such that maybe on balance, we're actually looking at a better situation than when we walked into it. And that's the ideal for when you're talking about renewables and you're thinking about your footprint out there in the ocean. So thank you again for the opportunity to present here. I'd really love to have conversations with folks, so please feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to talk more about this. And I really hope that everyone will take, at least one of the messages from these slides and take it out into the world. Start talking to your friends, your family, even to the press, to the people that you're engaging with in your community, and start talking about some of these very positive effects that we're going to see and are seeing from offshore renewables, so that we can have that well-rounded narrative. We certainly want to consider what the adverse impacts are and how we mitigate them, but we can't leave behind all these amazing benefits that we can get from a robust marine renewables industry. Thank you very much.